In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your fuel injector on this Toyota Corolla. It's located right on top of the engine. Let's get started. To start, we have to remove the engine cover, for which you can use a 10mm socket and remove the two mounting nuts. This one came off with the stud. That's fine. That happens sometimes. Just pull the engine cover up and out. Now with the engine cover off, you can see this right here is your fuel rail, which we have to unbolt in order to get the injectors out. However, to do that, because it's connected with a hard steel line that goes around the engine on a bracket, we have to take that bracket off first. So if you look on the side of the engine, this is your fuel line right here, and this is the bracket that we have to remove. There's a 10mm bolt right there, so let's get that off. Just to give myself a little bit more space to work, I'm going to pull this hose off of the intake and off of the valve cover actually, because we'll need it out of the way in a little bit. Set that aside. And then I'm also going to pull this off of the intake. Both of these hoses just have some clamps that you can squeeze with your fingers and pull them out of the way. Now we can get to this bracket a little bit better. Slide your socket down here. Once it's broken free, you should be able to remove it by hand. There it is. Set it aside safely. Now we have to unplug all the injectors, and to do that, they have these clips that lock them in. So squeeze them, be gentle, you don't want to break them, but squeeze them and pull the connector out. Of course, do this to all of them. There are 4 in total. Push these wires out of your way so we can work here. If you have debris stuck down there, I strongly recommend vacuuming it or blowing it with some compressed air. However, blowing it could result in potentially getting it into some of these open ports that we just opened. So I'm going to use a vacuum and stick the nozzle down here the best I can and get as much of the debris out so that when I pull the fuel rail out and the injectors break free, nothing goes down into the holes where they seal. And now with this clean, let's get a 12mm socket and unbolt these 2 bolts that hold the fuel rail down. Now the fuel rail is only held on with the pressure that the O-rings of the injectors are applying. So basically we just have to wiggle it and pry it out. Be careful, fuel will spill out at this point. Also make sure you're in a well-ventilated area because fuel fumes are very strong. Apply even pressure back and forth. Don't just rip one side out. There we go. At this point, if you had more debris, try to clean it out. Avoid using the vacuum if possible because fuel fumes and electric motors don't really mix together. Now to remove your injector, all you have to do is wiggle it until it slides out of the fuel rail. Like I said, there will be fuel here, and there you have it. There's your injector. Now if you had a new injector, to reinstall it, of course it would come with new O-rings because you have to replace the O-rings every time you take this out, or at least you should. And the best way to get this to slide in, if it doesn't naturally want to go down, which it's most likely not going to want to very easily, is to spray brake parts cleaner on the O-ring, just a little bit. This will lubricate it, and as you can see, it'll go down very easily. And the advantage of the brake parts cleaner is that it will dry and it will not stay wet. Also, if you spray any type of lubricant that is not good for the O-ring, it'll swell it up. And you might also not even be able to slide it in as easily as you would with brake parts cleaner. So brake parts cleaner or even carb cleaner, if you have any, that would be the best way to get these in. And we're going to do the same trick for these O-rings when it comes time to sliding them into the head. And before you do that, I just want to make a note about these spacers here. It is important that you still have these here and they haven't fallen off. Sometimes they'll get either stuck on the intake or they just fall off and they could drop down into your intake or just on the ground. And if you don't have them, the fuel rail cannot be spaced out and seated correctly. So just make sure these 2 are here. That's where the bolt slides through. Now take the fuel rail, flip it over, line it up with the holes where the injectors go. Be careful not to hit anything else on the way down here so that debris doesn't get on the O-rings. And once you're here, you can try to press it in. Sometimes they'll go in, other times it'll fight back. And in my case, it actually went in, but it didn't actually seat all of them evenly. So I'm gonna pop it back out, spray some brake parts cleaner on there, and then slide it in, and I can ensure that they all seat correctly. Perfect. Minimal force required. That is exactly what you want. Now we can put the 2 bolts in. It's important that you seat them by hand, not with the bolts. So what I mean is don't put them in here and then just snug the bolts up and press the rail down. That is how you ruin injectors, fuel rails, seals. It's not the way you want to go. You want to seat them by hand and feel that they actually bottomed out. Bottom these 2 out. And now I'm just going to grab them by hand with a ratchet. Make sure that they're nice and snug. Just give them about 1/8 of a turn. That should be perfect right there. Plug the injectors back in one at a time and make sure that they click. It's important that you hear that click because if it pops off while you're driving or while the engine's running, it's going to start misfiring and you're going to have some big issues to deal with. I have my flashlight pointing down there. It would be almost impossible for me to show you because I can barely see it, but you want to look right down at the base of the injectors where they meet the cylinder head. Make sure that there are no fuel leaks when you turn on the ignition. So don't turn the car on, but turn the ignition to the run position, so not 1, but 2 clicks. This primes the fuel system, it activates the fuel pump, puts pressure on the injectors, and I don't see any leaks at all, so that is perfect. Try and get you the best of view that I can. That is the bottom of the injector right there. You can see it seals up very well. There are no leaks, it's not wet. And after we put the vacuum hoses back on, I'm going to start the vehicle and do the same check again, because sometimes as the engine vibrates, these can start leaking. So let's put the bolt back for the bracket that holds the fuel rail on the side of the engine here. We'll bottom this out, make it nice and snug. That's good right there. Now these vacuum hoses, you didn't have to remove them. I just did to make things easier. So if you remove them also, just put them right back and make sure you get the hose clamps back on there so they can stay nice and tight. All right, let's start the engine. Make sure there are no fuel leaks with it running. There are no fuel leaks, so we're good to go. Let's put the engine cover on. Now let's just put the engine cover right back, make sure it lines up with both of the studs, and put the mounting nuts back on. Tighten it up. There you go, take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.